The following is an audio conversation with Professor Lekha Chakraborty on gender budgeting. Gender budgeting is a new and a modern approach to public finance that aims to integrate gender perspectives into government budgets. It does not mean that we create separate budgets for men and women. Rather, it's a fiscal innovation that aims to examine how public expenditure, how taxes affect men and women differently. In this podcast, we discuss gender budgeting in detail. Our guest today, Professor Lekha Chakraborty, is widely recognized as a pioneer of gender budgeting in India. She has played a significant role in making gender budgeting an important part of country's public finance framework. She has led the Asia Pacific region in International Monetary Fund's global research on gender budgeting, and she is also the author of the book Fiscal Policy for Sustainable Development: Gender Budgeting in India. Professor Lekha Chakraborty is a prominent economist at National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, which works closely with India's Ministry of Finance. She is a research associate at Levy Economics Institute of Bard College, New York, and she is also an elected member of the governing board of International Institute of Public Finance. It's a privilege to have you here, ma'am. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Sitesh. And it's my privilege to be on board as the inaugural speaker of your podcast series. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. So, ma'am, before I asked my first question, I wanted to ask a few questions about gender budgeting. But before I ask the questions, I wanted to present a few key statistics that I was reading yesterday. For the viewers, I wanted to present the statistics to show why this conversation is important. So, I was reading that India's female labor force participation rate it's still at only about 40%, and women spend about 4.5 hours per day in unpaid household work and caregiving work, which is three times more than men. And India stands at 131 out of 148 countries in 2025 Global Gender Gap report published by World Economic Forum. And women only occupy 14 to 15% seats in parliament. So I just wanted to share these statistics so that people can understand how unequal our society still is and why this conversation is important.
Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am. So my first question is that these are deeply social issues. So why should we look at fiscal policy and gender budgeting as a way to combat these issues rather than like structural social changes in the way we think? Why should we use fiscal policy?
Thank you. That's a very important question, because it's long term. The structural changes, that change in the mindset, that's a long term. But as policymakers, we have, a responsibility to look into the social issues. So an economist means it's not only looking into the growth issues, we have to go beyond the GDP. So this gender budgeting came up as a project which goes beyond the GDP. Because, as you rightly mentioned, we economists or the fiscal, the public policy makers, we have a tendency to confine our attention just to the GDP. But as you rightly mentioned, beyond the GDP, to look into the social issues is very crucial. Because if you ask me, the single most significant issue in the Indian economy or in India right now related to gender is a plummeting sex ratio, the child sex ratio. That means the discrimination starts even before birth in India. So, as policymakers, we have the responsibility to look into these issues and go beyond the GDP.
Right, ma'am. Ma'am, what has your experience been with this gender budgeting? Is it actually impactful? And could you maybe share us some statistics on how it has evolved in India and how it has been impactful?
Absolutely. Siddharth, I was like you when I got this project on gender budgeting. I was just a pup. I don't know what to, do with this project when Dr. Ashok Lahiri, right now he's the, vice chairman of Nidhi Aayog. He was my boss. I joined NIPFP and he gave me this project, the pioneering project on gender budgeting to look into. So I don't have much idea, or not me, not anybody in public finance field to look into into the public finance through a gender lens. So from there, if you ask me a delta X, that is the rate of change, I do believe that there is a change or there is an impact. And I will brief you what is a journey about. We started looking into the budget documents. Prima facie, it looks very gender neutral, but it is our responsibility to apply a gender lens into the budget. So gender budgeting, it is as you, wrote in your note you exchanged with me, it is a methodological tool. And as you rightly mentioned, it is not a separate women's budget or a separate, standalone fund we are trying to, generate in the context of India or any country for that matter. It is not separate women's budget. It's a methodological lens, as you rightly wrote in your note you shared with me.
Yes,
It is
ma'am.
a fiscal innovation tool. Yeah, it's a fiscal innovation tool. And like any other innovation tool, it has to, apply knowledge building and a specific model building exercise. Then it has to find out what are the important, institutional design or the mechanisms that need to happen. Then comes the state capacity and the capacity building exercise. And the last stage of any innovation is accountability. So gender budgeting has gone through all these phases in India, starting from, that knowledge building and the specific model building stage in India. And this, you can share with your, audience. We can share with your audience. The reference for this is my IMF paper I have written in 2016. It contains all these details that why we call gender budgeting a fiscal innovation tool of PFM, public finance management.
Right, ma'am. I'll attach the paper in the description so that people can read it. And ma'am,
Absolutely.
looking at capability building, so I was just like, if you look at the conversations, especially the political conversations over the last decade, women have increasingly emerged as a important political constituency and across states such as Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra. And we have seen women focused welfare schemes and direct benefit cash transfers. But ma'am, my question to you is this genuinely advancing what we just talked about, gender responsive budgeting and policy making? Is it advancing this agenda, or are we just seeing superficial cash transfers and not actually attacking the structures behind what's causing this inequality?
Your question has two parts. One, about the political or the governance, the feminization of governance, the political will. And the second is how you use the available fiscal space for gender equity, whether it's in the form of cash transfer or can we do little better? These are the two important components of your question. Let
Right,
me
ma'am.
take the first component. Yeah, let me take the first component. You remember Esther Duflo, the Nobel laureate, Esther Duflo's paper on, can feminization of governance impact public expenditure decisions? That was her randomized control experiment or randomized control trial, which she has done in, Rajasthan and West Bengal. You mentioned about the subnational government gender experiment. So the outcome of that study, Esther Duflo has done, the outcome is that, of course, the feminization of governance impact or they can change public expenditure decisions favoring women. So then, okay, the feminization of governance with the constitutional amendment, we have created that 33% reservation for women at the lowest tier of, the governance structure and the third tier of Indian fiscal federalism. So that is working like the women, the men and women, when they come, their difference in the perspectives, the talents, the insights, everything will be there. And that heterogeneity is very important for decision making, prospects. So the answer was an affirmative that, of course, the feminization of governance is crucial for important or the revealed preferences of women to be taken on board while we make the budgets. So that is very important. Now, coming to the second part of your question about the fiscal space, how we have to use the fiscal space, and can we design the cash transfers to the care economy and say that this is gender budgeting. No, the gender budgeting is much more than, providing cash transfers into the hands of the women in the care economy. And the gender budgeting is a broader concept. It looks into even the infrastructure investment. You say that, ma'am, infrastructure investment is gender neutral, but no, infrastructure investment cannot be gender neutral. And even in the infrastructure, for example, energy infrastructure. Now, with the crisis in West Asia, we are facing the energy crisis. And the energy crisis is a macroeconomic concern. Like that gender equality concern is equally a macroeconomic concern. It's not sectoral issue, or it is not a soft issue. And when the energy crisis happens, who is impacted first? And now, if you look at the Department of Petroleum, it's prima facie a gender neutral ministry. They have looked into applying a gender lens into energy infrastructure. So when you have limited budget, limited fiscal space, will you try to control your deficit, or will you try to look into the care economy burden of women? Will you look into the climate change concerns? So these are conflicting priorities. But within the conflicting priorities, Government of India has emphasized a gender equality lens into the energy infrastructure, and we have seen we provided the clean fuel for the women in the low income household. But that was beyond imagination, if you ask me, a decade back, gender budgeting or the questions related budget and gender, that was highly confined to the Ministry of Women and Child. But now it's a myth that about 40 plus or 45 plus ministries are looking into the gender lens or the gender perspectives, very seriously. And it is serious in the sense, in the beginning of the budget itself, this is implemented or this is mainstreamed through budget called circular. And if something is in the budget called circular, it is a law. It is mandated through a financial law, and the sectoral ministries need to do that. So we have done that with seriousness, that with the budget called circular, we have implemented the gender budgeting and institutionalized the gender budgeting. So cash transfer is just one component. It is much beyond that, including the infrastructure investment. We look into this gender budgeting issue.
Okay, so ma'am, please correct me if I'm wrong. I wanted to explore some of the themes that of your answer. One, cash transfers work, but they are limited in capability building, and it should be expanded towards something more. And gender budgeting is not just an exercise of allocating more money, but it should be forward looking. Is that what you're saying? It should be. Uh,
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you look into the fiscal space, if you are the finance minister, you have two options before you. One is basic income transfers, the universal basic income concept. So this cash transfers you mentioned for women is also the part of basic income transfers. But as finance minister, you have to take that call whether you will promote basic income transfers targeted. This is targeted, or you want to create the participation income in the hands of people, that women and men come out, they participate in the economic activity, and you as a finance minister give emphasis to the employment policies, and then this participation income will be given importance. So these are the major decisions a finance minister will take. And if her or his priority is to give importance to the participation income, then employment policy will be given importance. And employment, that guarantee scheme, that's a very crucial program for generating income in the economy through women and men participating in the economic activity.
Okay, ma'am. So, ma'am, one more thing. When we look at gender budgeting, so I had a few doubts on how should we classify schemes as should this be part of gender budgeting or not? So maybe PM Awas Yojana, they build housing for house built is in the name of the head women of household, and even MNREGA, the job employment scheme, 55% of beneficiaries are women. So, how should they be classified? Are they part of gender budgeting, or because these are broader schemes which aim to solve broader issues? Should they be part of gender budgeting or not?
Oh, these are very important questions. And, when we began this exercise, we were asked a question. Gender budgeting is confined to only specifically targeted programs for women, or as you rightly pointed out, in the mainstream spending, if there is an intrinsic gender lens or a gender allocation, do we need to look into these? These were the questions, came up when NIPFP, that pioneering work I mentioned, when we were doing the study. So what we have done is, usually across countries, we do classifiers or markers when we do the gender budgeting. So, in the sense, the classifiers or the classification happened in, it's threefold. One, if you look at the gender budget statement, which was designed by that pioneering exercise in an IPFP, which I mentioned that I was part of,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
we identified the specifically targeted programs. That means if a program's the impact that 100% is targeting the women, then that is categorized into the part A, which is, since 2005, we started producing the, gender budget statement. So if you look into, you are aware of that, I know that. So this part A is the specifically targeted programs for women. Then, the questions you asked me, that is less than 1% of the total budget if your gender budgeting exercise is capturing only the specifically targeted programs for women. So the rest 99% of the budget, do you think that is gender neutral, or how do you apply the methodological lens of gender budgeting? So that was a methodological challenge. Then, the questions you asked, many of the mainstream expanding, they have gender impacts. How do you look into that, and what is the methodology for that? And the programs you mentioned, we look into that through the methodology, benefit incidence analysis, public expenditure benefit incidence analysis. And through that methodology, we try to capture the gender impacts of the mainstream spending. And that, we categorized as a part B of the gender budget. Now, recently, the part C is also there, but certain spending, you don't want to even look into that, to mainstream, because it is a gender neutral spending. So like that, a insignificant portion of budget can be gender neutral. But these three categorization, part A, B, and C, this has happened in 2004 when the Ministry of Finance constituted a committee of classification of budgetary transactions. And I can share you the link. It is there in the Ministry of website, in finance website. This classification of budget transactions, that committee report, which I was a part of, I was a member of that subcommittee looking into this classification through a gender lens. And we have produced 5, 6 matrices, analytical matrices, to capture the budget through the gender lens, and to capture the fiscal data through the gender lens. So those analytical matrices were shared across sectors and across states of India to capture the gender budgeting. And as the methodology remained constant since 2004, we have a time series data on gender budgeting in India to look into the impacts, across states of India which adopted gender budgeting, and across sectors over time. That time series analysis of gender budgeting has been created using this NIPFP methodology of categorizing into part A, part B. It is not partitioning the budget, it is mainstreaming gender into the budget.
Okay, okay, ma'am. So, just to clarify, we are categorizing these different schemes so that we can understand the impact of these schemes. Is that what you're saying in some way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The impact is a different question. It is like our budget that comes in 3 stages, as you know. First is the budget estimates. Then after 1 year, the revised estimates come, and then the actual. So we try to capture the allocations, the financial allocations, and monitor the inputs. But the outcomes is a question, that's yet another. Like, what is whether the budget allocated for the gender budgeting translated into gender outcomes? That's a different question.
Okay, so
So the first part,
classification.
yeah, tell me.
So classification is done based on the intent, and it's not really about the like how they are targeting women. Is that how the classification is done?
Absolutely a brilliant question. If you look into the metrics part, metrics B in the classification of budgetary transactions, this question is addressed that the intent or it is based on the impact that do the gender budgeting. It can be both because some of the schemes, the brilliant bureaucrats, when they design, they incorporated gender lens or that in the intent in the planning stage itself. So that is ex ante budgeting, gender budgeting. But as you said, it can be intent or it can be impact. And some of the schemes, if there is no gender lens intrinsically adopted at the planning stage, we look into the impact of the data to capture the gender budgeting, which we call as exposed gender budgeting. And, I worked with certain communes in the Philippines, in three communes like Hilongs and Sorsogon. There are different communes. Communes means it's like our villages. So there, the intent, that question related to gender budgeting was very crucial in the budget classification. So their intent in one of the communes, that city councillor was a doctor. So her intent was to reduce the maternal mortality rate of that commune to zero. So what could be the fiscal policy to attain that? That was a gender budgeting there. In another commune, the women were going abroad as nannies from the Philippines, and that was affecting the absence of mother from the house was affecting the households in the commune. So how to arrest women going out to work? So that was their intent, and they revamped agriculture, irrigation. So that was incorporated at the planning stage, and that's the way it was done. But in certain other countries, in Morocco, when I worked with the officials in the Rabat, and it was a difficult assignment in which, it was only in Arab and French, and there was a translator to translate. But the beautiful, that analysis in Rabat and Casablanca they have done, water was a major issue. It's a North African country, so they also incorporate, as you mentioned, as an intent to increase the enrollment ratio of girls in schools. They increased education budget, enrollment didn't increase. But when they increased the water budgets, enrollment increased because the girls in the households, the ensuring clean water in the household was the responsibility of the girl child. So it is both. You can do it ex ante in the planning process by identifying the real gender needs, and it can also be exposed by looking into the benefits of the benefit incidence analysis or the fiscal incidence. So this can be both. But if you ask me, from my vantage point, I see that ex ante, as you told, intent needs to be there at the planning stage itself before you look into the classification of budget.
Right, ma'am. So, ma'am, this is my final question on gender budgeting. So, if you were designing an ideal gender responsive budget for India, given the challenges we face today, what would be some of its most important features? And do you think we should have a formal legal mandate of some sort, which would increase the outcomes of this gender budgeting exercise?
You said it. I hope this question will be given much importance by the policymakers, that legal mandate is very crucial for sustainability. But ours was like Ministry of Finance owned the process. But as you said, if you get the legal mandate, that is very important. And if you ask me, any countries have done that. Korea has done that in the national finance law, in the PFM process. Through the legal mandate, gender budgeting was incorporated into all the components of PFM. So hope Niti Aayog chairman, vice chairman, Dr. Ashok Lahiri will take this question very seriously and to think of giving gender budgeting a legal mandate. That's very important for sustainability. But if you look into the sustainability when compared to other countries, India's gender budgeting is a sustainable exercise and within government, spending. And another question, the next component of your question, other than the legal mandate, is what are the important components, single most significant components you look into when you want to do that. And I want it to be a macro question. and it should not just confine to the sectoral. So gender budgeting is a macroeconomic and a PFM tool. So that needs to be given the prime importance. It should not be given to a labor department to experience a feminization view in the economy, because a labor department will not be able to do that. It has to be a macroeconomic question. And in order to have a feminization view, in the sense, when the economy progresses initially, as you rightly mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, using your statistics, like the female labor force participation was plummeting. But after a point, there should be a U-turn. So, in order to in order to make that happen, that feminization view, we have to integrate the care economy infrastructure into the gender budgeting, which I hope that the Ministry of Finance will take it up very seriously. Related to the care economy infrastructure, the Nordic countries, the Scandinavian countries are doing well. And if you look into the gender development index, you know that based on Sudhiranand and Amartya Sen's methodology, the gender development index, the equally distributed equivalent, that outcome measure is developed. So this outcome linked gender budgeting is very crucial. The resources linking to result is very crucial. So to me, that care economy infrastructure and linking it to the women's labor force participation is very crucial, because that's the smartest and fastest way to increase your GDP. But we are underestimating the potential of increasing the women's participation in the economy, because when you look at the potential GDP, of course that is an unobserved variable, and economists, that we use the filters and the econometric methodology to arrive at that potential GDP. But you need to ask a broader question. This potential GDP intrinsically contains the contribution of women done in the care economy sector. Because in the note, I really enjoyed the note you sent me, and this question was there, like, what will happen to the systems of national accounts? That's a question you sent me. This is an
Yes, ma'am.
important question. Yeah. So how to incorporate that in the systems of national accounts? There, the invisible component of this, unmonetized sector needs to be given importance. And using a methodology, we need to incorporate that component, the invisible non-market time. And using the time use survey, we can capture, because we need a different set of data to look into this question and incorporate this component into the systems of national accounts. And United Nations Statistical Division has done that in 1993 by extended the production boundary of the GDP to incorporate the statistically invisible, the care economy. And they protected it as a satellite account, because there are methodological issues to keep it within the GDP, because whether we use price, whether we use wages, or whether we use opportunity cost to integrate that work into the GDP, these are the methodological issues. But first, look into the infrastructure. Second, infrastructure policy. Second, look into the SNA and know the importance of integrating the statistically invisible part of the work done in the economy using the new sets of data, like time use data. And the final is fiscal marksmanship. Fiscal marksmanship, we have talked about in terms of the BERE and actuals. If there is any significant deviation between the budget estimates, that is, at the time of the budget speech, the budget estimates come, you promise something. But when you look into the revised estimates, if there is a significant deviation between this, then the fiscal marksmanship is affected. Your marksmanship is affected. So you have to make that promise viable by giving that actual spending. There should not be any deviation between what you promise and what you give as actual spending. So that fiscal marksmanship is important. And then primarily the Finance Commission. Intergovernmental fiscal transfers, that is very important. Gender budgeting is not just confined to the gender budget statement. It touches all the important aspects of the public finance, including the taxation. In taxation, in the sense, the property entitlements can be given to the women if you rightly, devise your taxation structure. Then, if you look into the intergovernmental fiscal transfers, if you integrate a gender lens into the tax transfer formula, then that can also be given importance in terms of integrating gender budgeting. So it's not just confined to the gender budget statement. It's much more than that, because many of you, I don't know, but you may be an exception, but many of the students thought that gender budgeting just can get confined to gender budget statement. No, it's a broader, a methodological tool than a gender budget statement, and it touches taxation, tax transfers, public spending, and all aspects of the public financial management, and also performance budgets and outcome budgets.
Right, ma'am. Ma'am, there's so many, like even fiscal federalism. I wanted to explore those topics, but we are running out of time. But maybe we can do another episode sometime in the future where we explore fiscal federalism and how it connects with gender budgeting and so many more themes. But ma'am, I'll ask my
Absolutely.
final few questions. One of them being that the West Asia crisis. So one of the interviews I was seeing one of your interviews, and there you mentioned that developing countries do not follow real business cycles, and if we have a downturn or a crisis, then the effects are long term. And so if we are facing this West Asia crisis, then this is a broader question on how we should look at deficits, debt, and public infrastructure spending, because we'll also face inflationary pressures. So how should we look at solving the hardships that people will face due to this crisis?
Absolutely. It's a macroeconomic question. Yeah, this business cycles in the context of emerging economies, it's not certain. But in the in times of crisis like West Asia crisis or the pandemic crisis or any crisis, we have to look into the monetary and the fiscal policy tools not as counter-cyclical policy tools, because the cyclicality of the fiscal policy acting as a counter-cyclical policy tool, or the monetary policy as a counter-cyclical policy tool, that is not working. So using the interest rate, it is not one and one, like we get the growth outcomes. And as you rightly mentioned, in times of crisis, the downturn that is not cyclical, it can be a permanent scar. Then the importance is looking to the structural aspects, the structural reforms that need to be taken up, like looking into the total factor productivity, looking into the land, labor, capital. So we need to apply a gender lens into all these next gen reforms of Vikasit Bharat. As you know, Vikasit Bharat has 9 pillars, and one of the important pillars is next gen reforms, which is tied to the total factor productivity, focusing on the deregulation, the reforms related to land, labor, capital, and investment. So we need to take up those questions at the macroeconomic level. Otherwise, considering that it is cyclical, then after a certain point of time, it will automatically, that upturn will happen. It will not happen, because that counter-cyclical policy narrative will not work, as you rightly pointed out.
Right, ma'am. So, ma'am, my final question to you is this was a very interesting conversation, and I enjoyed it a lot, and I learned a lot. There are a lot of things that I'll attach the documents and the things that we talked about so that people can explore these themes further. My final question to you, ma'am, is about so I did my first course on macroeconomics last semester, where we learned all these theories about classical, Keynesian, new classical, and all these ISLM models and stuff like that. But I've seen that undergraduate students have, because our syllabus is limited, so we have trouble in understanding what is actually going on in macroeconomic public finance and the actual decision making that is happening. So, what would be some of the readings and materials or magazines that you would suggest that people should read to learn more about issues and the current state of economy?
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, there is a disconnect. When I was a student, I also felt that this macroeconomics, there is a deep disconnect with the economy. Yeah, that's very true. So, along with your text, and even the macroeconomics text need a revision. As Gita Gopinath rightly pointed out, I think there is, I think a major project now will be to revise the macroeconomic text or the macroeconomic basic reference books given to the students to read. And those revisions, they will happen very soon because the economists and the professors are very keen about that. And along with these references, some light readings could be you take a look into the blogs, of major policy think tanks. That blogs will be very helpful, like in IMF blog or the project syndicate. These are giving you a broader, it's not the technical blogs, but they articulate the technical issues in a very technical manner so that the students will be able to understand. So take a look into the project syndicate, IMF blogs, then the Peterson Institute in US. You take a look into the blogs by Peterson Institute. Then CISIFO in Germany, Munich. There's an institute, they work on the issues related to the public finance, the macroeconomics. It's more empirical. So you can take a look into the CISIFO works from the Munich Institute. So these are the things that is coming to my mind quickly. Then Finance and Development, that journal by IMF, that the finance and development. That's also very good. Then the economists. Then the students should take a look into the editorials of important dailies, regularly. That's a very important exercise. And in 1 month or 2 months time, things start showing up, and you will be able to gain that vocabulary to write the issues. You will get that economist language. So take a look into the Business Standard, Financial Express, Mint, all these editorials. So these are the things you can do along with your, the reference books.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for this episode. I really enjoyed, and I'm manifesting that we'll have another episode where we discuss more of these themes and much more of your research.
Sure, sure, sure. It's my pleasure to come back. And I really enjoyed the way you asked me the questions. And Satish, good luck with your podcast series. And I know that it's going to be a major, a brilliant exercise over the time. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.